Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. Welcome to Group 1 with me Ana Laila as the first presenter and Ahmad Saifur Rijal as the second presenter and M. Fari Musaki as the third presenter. Now, we'd like to explain you about assessing receptive skills, which are listening and reading. So, assessing listening. In assessing listening, the factors that we need to consider is considering the test taker and their needs, the kind of information we want to know about students' listening skills, and the most appropriate ways to assess these skills so that our test is appropriate and accuracy scored. Things that we can observe during listening as the receptive skills are process and product, which are invisible and audible. Next is types of listening. First is intensive, second is responsive, the third is selective, the fourth is extensive. So first is intensive. So intensive listening is listening for perception of the components, which are phonemes, words, intonation, discourse makers, and etc., of a larger stretch of language. And the intensive listening tasks, which are recognizing phonological and morphological elements. For example, distinguishing phonemic pairs. For example, grass. And the test taker read as glass. Leaf. The test taker read as leaf. And the next is distinguishing phonological pairs. For example, mist. And the test taker read as mist. And distinguishing stress patterns, for example, I can't go, but the test taker read as I can't go. The next is paraphrase recognition. For example, I come from Taiwan, and the test taker read as I'm Taiwanese. And the next is one-word stimulus. For example, vine, but the test taker read as wine. The next is paraphrase recognition. For the first is sentence paraphrase. For example, hello, my name is Keiko. I come from Japan. And the first is Keiko is comfortable in Japan. The second is Keiko is Japanese. So we have to look for the paraphrase sentence of that. Keiko is Japanese. The next is dialogue paraphrase. For example, the man said, Hi Maria, my name is George. The woman said, Nice to meet you, George. Are you American? And the man said, No, I'm Canadian. So the dialogue paraphrase A is George lives in the United States. The second, George is American. The third is George comes from Canada. The fourth is Maria is Canadian. So we have to choose the correct paraphrase of that. And the next is responsive. So, responsive is listening to a relatively short stretch of language, which are a greeting, question, comment, comprehension check, and etc., in order to make an equally short response. The first is responsive listening task, response to multiple choice question. The purpose is recognition of WH question and its appropriate response. For example, how much time did you take to do your homework? For A is in about an hour, B is about an hour, C about $10, and D, yes, I did. The next is open-ended response. Simple discourse sequences. For example, how much time did you take to do your homework? And the test taker write or speak to answer that question. And the next is selective. Selective is a processing stretch of discourse such as short monologues for several minutes in order to scan for certain information. The purpose is Such performance is not necessary to look for global or general meaning, but to be able to comprehend disseminated information in a context of longer stretches of spoken language, such as classroom direction from teacher, tapes, or radio, news item, or stories. Assessment tasks in selecting listening could ask students to listen for names, numbers, a grammatical category, direction in a math exercise, or certain facts and events. For example, listening clues. So students filling the blanks. Verbal information transfer. Students give multiple choice verbal response. The next is picture cued information transfer. So students choose the picture based on what they have heard. The next is chart completion. The students fill in a grid. The next is sentence repetition. Students repeat stimulus sentence. The next is extensive. So extensive is listening to develop a top-down global understanding of spoken language. Extensive performances range from listening to lengthy lectures to listening to a conversation and deriving a comprehensive message or purpose. So the example is dictation. Students listen usually 3 times and write the paragraphs. The next is dialogue. Students hear the dialogue, multiple choice comprehension question. The next is dialogue. Students hear the dialogue and open-ended response. The next is lecture. Students take notes, summaries, list main points, and etc. The next is interpretive task. Students hear a poem and interpret the meaning. The next is stories, narrative. Students retell a story. Next is micro and macro skills of listening. So micro is attending to the smaller bits and chunks of language in more of bottom-up process. And macro is focusing on the larger elements involved in a top-down approach. What makes listening difficult? First is clustering. So clustering is chunking phrases, clauses, and constituents. The next is redundancy, repetition, refreshing, elaboration, and insertions. The next is reduced forms. Is understanding the reduced forms that may not have been a part of English learners' past experiences in classes where only formal textbook language has been present. The next is performance variables, being able to weed out hesitation, false starts, pauses, and correction in a natural speech. The next is colloquial language, the idiom, slang, reduced forms, shared cultural knowledge. And the next is rate of delivery, keeping up with the speed of delivery, processing automatically as the speaker continues. The next is stress, rhythm, and intonation, correctly understanding prosodic elements of spoken language, which is almost always much more difficult than understanding the smaller phonological bits and pieces. The next is interaction, negotiation, clarification, attending, sign-offs, turn taking, maintenance, and termination. What?